If you've never played doubles, you might not be aware that the best moves in this format are vastly different than what defines a singles tier. Today, let's bring a spotlight to some of these moves and discuss what the best moves are that you should be considering when building a team for VGC. There are a lot of powerful options in this format that can absolutely change the course of any game, and today we're going to break down some of those powerful ones based on a few different categories. There's a lot of moves to go over today, but before we do, let me know your thoughts on the moves that we discussed today. And while you're on your way down there, consider leaving a like and making sure that you're subscribed to the channel. With only about 3% of you guys subscribed right now, everyone who watched this video ended up clicking that subscribe button. We'd get much closer towards our goal of 100,000 subscribers. With that out of the way though, let's get started off by going over the best support moves in VGC. Starting off with support moves, let's first quickly define what a support move actually is. Essentially, these are going to be any moves that can enable your partner space to perform far more easily in a given game. There's a lot of different options for support moves, and starting off, we have plenty of offensive support moves. There are support moves that are purely used for their effects, as well as options that are used specifically because they're decent offensive moves that also have a really good side benefit. I think we should go over the ones first though that you purely use for their effects. Starting with the most obvious option, Protect. Now, Protect is a pretty foundational move to VGC, and in my eyes, this is the cornerstone of what a good support move looks like. While there's certainly options like Urshifu's Unseen Fist and Iron Boulder's Mighty Cleave that can bypass Protect, for a majority of teams, most of your gameplay is going to be either won or lost by this move. Because VGC is played in a 2v2 setting, the ability to punish an opponent for badly targeting at the slot is a really big deal, and it can absolutely redefine any given match by only going through one single turn. There's plenty of variations of Protect that have their own unique benefits, such as Spiky Shield, which damages the opponent if you make contact, or King's Shield, which will drop the opponent's attack by 2 stages for making contact, or even options such as Wide Guard and Crafty Shield that will protect both you and your ally, but they only do so by meeting very specific conditions. On the whole though, regular Protect is probably going to be the best version of this, as it's both the most simple and the most complete option, as you don't really need to worry about meeting specific conditions to trigger its benefit, and it will just block everything in sight. What are some other trademark support moves though in VGC? Well, let's break down one of the fundamental pieces of VGC being Redirection. Now, Redirection essentially is the ability to make sure that your opponent is not hitting their intended target. And there's a lot of ways that you can do this. While there are some abilities that have this same sort of concept in mind, such as Lightning Round and Storm Drain, which will redirect certain types of attacks, at the same time, these aren't really what we're talking about today. So instead, I want to focus on the 2 moves that have this benefit, being Rage Powder and Follow Me. Now, Rage Powder is truly an objectively worse version of Follow Me, but the distribution is typically better. Because of the fact that options like Safety Goggles and any given grass type can completely ignore the move, there certainly is a lot more counterplay. But considering that Pokemon like Volcarona and Amoonguss do get this move, you can actually get a lot of value out of it still. The Follow Me, on the other hand, until Generation 9, was typically saved for far more insignificant Pokemon. And considering the best users were Clefairy and Smeargle in previous formats, it's easy to see where this difference comes from. While Follow Me has existed in other Pokemon with niche roles in VGC such as Magmar and Blastoise depending on the format, Blastoise lost the move in Generation 9, and Magmar is still an Violet user with pretty terrible stats. And despite having some niche in the format, it's really not considered a good Pokemon outside of this move. For Generation 9 though, we actually got 2 pretty decent Pokemon that finally got access to Follow Me, being Mousehold and Ogerpon. Now, Mousehold has a lot of benefits, such as its synergy with Annihilate, as well as the ability Friend Guard. Meanwhile, Ogerpon is probably the best offensive Pokemon to utilize this move. While Mousehold certainly isn't a meta-defining Pokemon by any means, Ogerpon definitely is, and it's widely considered the best user of this move in a lot of formats besides Regulation G, where Clefairy has taken the throne again. Ogerpon definitely is also pretty carried by this move, and while you don't always run it, the fact that Ogerpon can utilize this move as well as its different type masks means that it's a pretty good offensive option that can both apply really high damage to opponents and draw on their attacks in order to sack itself if it's not going to have the best field position. I do think that Follow Me, despite not always being seen on Ogerpon's moveset depending on the format, is a pretty big reason though that it can function so well in tournaments at such a consistent level, so I definitely still attribute this move to being a really impactful option for the format. If we can enable the Pokemon to attack the wrong target though, there's gotta be some options to at least ensure that we can deal more damage when doing so, right? While there are plenty of status moves such as Screech and Scary Face that will hinder the opponent's play to some degree, the best option for this is probably Helping Hand. This gives any Pokemon that is affected by Helping Hand a 1.5 multiplier to whatever attack they're using this turn. While other moves can give stronger boosts such as Screech, lowering the target's defense by 2 stages, at the same time, this is a much more general option. And similar to how Protect is the best option of these protection moves, moves due to the fact that it's so broad. Helping Hand affecting both physical and special attackers at the same time is definitely still a really good benefit for this, and I think it's one of the reasons why this move is such a dangerous option. In any game of competitive Pokemon, if you ensure that you'll at least be the first one to move, then you're probably going to have some form of an advantage over your opponent. While the best options in singles are definitely going to be Sticky Webs and Thunder Wave, in VGC, due to the fact this is a 2v2 game state, you're actually benefiting more from Tailwind and Trick Room. With both moves, you only have a 4-turn life cycle, but when the average game is going to be 5 to 10 turns, this is an absolutely game-changing option. Tailwind is going to double both Pokemon's speed on your side of the field. Meanwhile, Trick Room will reverse the speed tiers entirely, and both moves last for a good portion of the game. Because Trick Room and Tailwind have far more potent impact on the speed for the entire field, these are typically a lot more desirable, whereas Sticky Webs is going to hit both opponents, but it's only for one stage, and Thunder Wave will only hit one opponent at a time, despite matching the same speed benefit you'd get from Tailwind. So this definitely is a lot more of a desirable field condition, and it can really impact a lot of gameplay. Finally, if we're going to talk about support moves that don't deal damage, we have to talk about Spore. Now, Spore is really only utilized on 2 Pokemon, being Smeargle and Amoonguss, but the ability to put an opponent to sleep with a guaranteed 100% accurate move is absolutely game-changing. Because of the fact that you can stop an opponent from targeting you for multiple turns, and there's no sleep clause in VGC, these moves are very deadly. Sleep is definitely the best status that you have any real control over in VGC, and despite all the countermeasures such as Electric Terrain and Safety Goggles you have for Spore, it still is one of the best moves that you could utilize at any support Pokemon, and it really is a big reason why options like Amoonguss and Smeargle see such consistent play in the format. But what are some more offensive support options you can utilize? Offensively, there's definitely a lot less options you can utilize to support a team, but one of the best in this regard is definitely Fake Out, which can absolutely deter an opponent for one single turn from even moving when they would otherwise really need to win a game. Despite having so much counterplay such as opposing ghost types, abilities like Inner Focus, Protect, and many other factors, Fake Out is still such a good option because any opponent that doesn't have this wide list of counterplay is guaranteed to get punished just by the click of Fake Out. It's arguably the second most important move when considering a team for VGC, and I would only really rank it below Protect, in my opinion. In VGC, one of the other more unique offensive moves that never really gets to see a place in singles is definitely Pollen Puff. Now, Pollen Puff is a pretty game-changing move, and it's another huge factor in why a Pokemon like Amoonguss really does shine in this format. While I didn't intend for this to be a video just talking about Amoonguss's moveset, considering the fact this is now the 4th move it commonly runs that we actually have discussed today, it really just goes to show how good these moves are, and the impact that a good moveset can make on a Pokemon in the format. Despite not being a stat for Amoonguss, this 90 base power bug move can deal a lot of damage to enemies, and it's also really useful due to its secondary effect, because if you target a partner slot with this, it actually gives them a 50% recovery. While there are certainly more broken healing moves such as Lunar Blessing and Jungle Healing, at the same time though, having the ability to both deal damage and heal a partner slot without having any drawback whatsoever is a really big deal, and it makes this one of the best offensive support moves in the game. Amoonguss with Pollen Puff is probably one of the biggest reasons that balance even has a place in the format. Now I would argue it's up there in terms of importance with things like Intimidate for this archetype. Let's talk about some offensive means of dropping stats in VGC, because there are plenty of ways of doing so. There are a lot of moves like Snarl, Breaking Swipe, and Icy Wind that all kind of do the same thing just for different stats, as these are mostly moves either that deal 55 base damage with 95% accuracy, or just options that have 60 base power and 100% accuracy, but instead have a type immune to them, such as Breaking Swipe. These moves are typically utilized on bulkier Pokemon, but they're not exclusive to it per se, as we have seen options like Snarl Chi-Yu and Icy Wind Flutter Mane still be very top tier threats in Regulation F. I wouldn't say these moves are exclusive to support Pokemon though, but they definitely do have a means of supporting teams when your really good offensive Pokemon otherwise wouldn't have the best matchup. A bit of a weird category to go with, but I do want to talk about this gray area of moves that while their intention isn't to support, they technically do, and it's really useful because of the fact that when these moves activate their secondary effects, it's absolutely game-changing. These are moves like Heat Wave, Muddy Water, and especially our main offender, Rock Slide. They have a 90 base power and 95% accuracy, and they have a really good secondary effect to them that will absolutely ruin opponents. Heat Wave, for example, can burn each opponent with a 10% chance, and considering this can activate where you can potentially burn both opponents at once, it's a really big game changer, especially when hindering physical threats. Muddy Water also has a chance to drop each opponent's accuracy by 10%, but the really big one is Rock Slide, which can completely stop an opponent from moving entirely for one turn just by having a 10% chance to flinch. You're typically going to run these moves because they can hit both Pokemon at once, but the secondary effects are certainly a really nice benefit to them. And while I wouldn't say they're technically support, they definitely have the ability to really support a team if you play them right. Before we get into some of the signature moves that make this list, I do want to talk about one key offensive move that has a really good secondary effect to support a team, being Knockoff. Knockoff is mostly utilized as a really good support move, and it's widely considered one of the best in the game due to the fact that it's a really strong dark type offensive option that completely gets rid of an item, barring abilities like Sticky Hold. Removing an item can genuinely be a reason that a Pokemon just outright dies, since you can remove an item like Clear Amulet and drop an opponent's stats now, or an option like a Resistance Berry and now deal twice as much damage to an opponent. I'd say Knockoff is pretty cut and dry, but honestly, I'm just glad that we've seen some attempts to reduce the amount of Pokemon that get this move in Generation 9, because nobody needed to see Kingambit utilizing Knockoff in early formats. Finally, I want to briefly touch on some signature moves, because while these moves are fairly cut and dry, they definitely are a big impact on why certain Pokemon see a lot of play. For starters, Lunar Blessing is a really big reason why Cresselia was able to keep up with Regulation D's power creep, and it was one of, if not the best Trick Room setters in that format. Because of the fact that Cresselia was able to kill both itself and the partner Pokemon by 1/4 their health, while curing any status conditions on those two Pokemon, it's a really good move because it's essentially combined the options like Life Dew with its own built-in refresh. Only Cresselia gets this move though, but I would be remiss for not mentioning that Zarude technically has an equivalent of Jungle Healing, which does the exact same thing, but Zarude happens to be banned in VGC though. I do think, to be fair, Zarude would never be as good of a user of Jungle Healing as Cresselia is for Lunar Blessing, but that's mostly due to the fact that it's just not as bulky. The Urshifu's are up next, and their moves are widely considered to be some of the most broken in the game. With Urshifu Rapid getting Surging Strikes, a 25 base power attack that hits 3 times and deals water type damage. Meanwhile, Wicked Blow is a nice single target dark type move that deals 75 base power. Both moves have a guaranteed chance to crit, barring abilities like Shell Armor, and they also both are really powerful, and they're some of the biggest reasons that the Urshifus, in tandem with their ability Unseen Fist, are so easily able to get past any defensive Pokemon. This essentially allows Urshifu to not only bypass Protect thanks to its ability, but it also allows you to get past defensive setup like Iron Defense, or even the ability Intimidate, which would otherwise mitigate most physical threats. Now, 2 of the best Pokemon in Regulation G have been the Calyrex forms, and Glacial Lance and Astral Barrage are pretty big reasons for this. Both of these take advantage of 2 of the best offensive stabs in the game, being Ice and Ghost respectively, and they both also are spread moves with 100% accuracy and 120 base power. Both of these are 2 very difficult moves to handle, and considering these 2 Pokemon benefit on such widely different archetypes, it's no wonder to see why these Pokemon are so potent, and it's especially thanks to these specific dual stabs. Finally, I want to talk about Koraidon and Miraidon for a minute, because these moves essentially give both Pokemon really strong options to wall break through pretty much everything. Collision Course and Electric Drift have a really nice benefit of dealing 1/3 extra damage for any super effective attack. Because of the fact that a lot of Pokemon can accidentally tear it into types weak to these 2 moves, you essentially need a Focus Sash or Sturdy to survive any hit if you're super effective. Even if you're gonna get all the way set up to +6, you're still gonna really struggle taking these hits, because these 2 Pokemon are offensive monsters, and this is a really great way to deal some extra damage. So what did you guys think of some of the best moves in this format? Let me know down below if I missed anything that you guys would have considered a really good move in VGC, and while you're on your way down there, consider subscribing, as I upload weekly VGC content, as well as plenty of short form content you guys can check out after this video. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to our 2 editors, being Dose, who edited the video you're seeing today and is now taking over as our long form content editor, as well as Becca, who handles all of our short form content. I'm gonna link all their stuff down below, so make sure you guys check them out, as they both do an incredible job at just being incredible creators, and I'd love it if you guys can give them some added support. Also, if you want to go the extra mile in supporting our editors, consider becoming a member, as for just a couple dollars a month, all the money that you guys put towards memberships goes straight to their pockets, and it's a great way to give them a little bit of a bonus. With that said, I'll see you guys in next week's video. Until then, peace out, guys.